Today we go over some helpful tips for using self-tapping screws when installing your iron or aluminum fence. Hey everyone, Jason from Iron Fence Shop. If you aren't familiar with using the self-tapping type of screws used on iron and aluminum fence and gates, there are some guidelines you'll want to be aware of. So today I wanted to go over some helpful tips when using these self-tapping screws during your fence installation. While our iron and aluminum fences use different size self-tapping screws in different ways, these tips will apply to both. The tips we review today will really apply to any type of self-tapping screw being used with any type of metal. Before we jump into the install tips, let's take a closer look at what makes a self-tapping screw different from a normal screw you may be more familiar with and where they're used in our iron and aluminum fences. Here's a common wood screw that you're probably familiar with. It comes to a point here on the end and has the threads going up. If we look at our self-tapping screw here, you will see that instead of a point, we have this cutting or drill head on the tip before you get to the threads. This allows the screw to cut into the metal, drilling a hole that will then get threaded when the screw pulls through that hole. Let's take a closer look at our iron and aluminum prop pieces behind me here to show you where these self-tapping screws come into play on both. Let's start with our installed Stronghold iron fence panel here. This cast iron hanging bracket will slide onto the rail here, and your self-tapping screw will go through the bracket under here to secure the fence panel to your posts. Now let's jump over to our Infinity aluminum fence panel. With an aluminum fence, there's a 3/4 inch notch in the end of your rail that will fit inside of the post. Once your rail is inside the post, you're going to drive your self-tapping screw through the face of the post here so it ties the post to the fence rail inside. There are also some screws on the face of the aluminum fence rail here. Well, those are also self-tapping screws. Those are installed at the factory and not ones you'll need to deal with during installation. You'll find a lot of your gate latches and the self-closing hinges will also use self-tapping screws, so these tips will apply to installing those as well. With that, let's jump into the tips when using self-tapping screws to install the iron and aluminum fence and gates. Tip number 1 when using self-tapping screws: speed kills. Slow down your drilling. Most folks' experience with drilling is in soft materials like wood or drywall where fast speed is okay. However, when drilling metal, you want more of a slow to medium speed. Let's take a closer look at what I mean. Here I have a section of post along with one of our iron fence self-tapping screws. What you don't want to do is put your screw in place and blast away at full speed like this. While you could get lucky and get a bite that drills in, it's best to start slow and give your self-tapping screw a chance to get a bite. The faster the speed, the more likely you are to burn out your self-tapping screw's drill head. So what I recommend is to start at a slow to medium pace and give the screw a chance to get a good bite. Once you have a pretty good hole started where the screw is likely not to pop out or walk around, you can speed up some, but I still don't recommend going full blast. It seems counterintuitive that slower is better, but blasting away at high speed is typically only going to result in burned out self-tapping screws or your screw moving around and biting in where you don't want it to. Tip number 2 when using self-tapping screws: use a punch or pilot hole before drilling in the self-tapping screw. What these two things will do is give your self-tapping screw a clean place to start and prevent the screw from walking around on the post. To use the punch method, you'll need a metal punch from the hardware store and a hammer. For the pilot hole method, you'll need a power drill and a quality metal drill bit that is a few sizes smaller than the self-tapping screw. Let's go in for a closer look on both. Let's start with the punch, or center punch as it's sometimes called. As you can see here on the punch, it has a small sharp point here on the end. Once you've marked the post where your screw needs to go, you'll put the point of your punch there and firmly tap it with the hammer. You'll want to put some force behind your hammer, but we aren't looking for a baseball bat swing that could damage the concrete down in the post hole. You'll want to do it in one hit too. You cannot lightly tap a punch multiple times and get the same effect. We are looking to essentially dent the metal enough that the self-tapping screw's tip will begin cutting in that spot and drill in. Next, let's look at drilling a pilot hole. This involves drilling a smaller hole through the face of your post for your self-tapping screw to start in. When drilling a pilot hole, you want a drill bit that is several sizes smaller than the self-tapping screw you're using. It cannot be the same size or larger than the self-tapping screw. Otherwise, the hole will be too big and not allow the self-tapping screw to thread itself in. Once you have your pilot hole in your post, you can put your self-tapping screw up to the hole and it should have an easier time starting and cutting itself in. Tip number 3 when using self-tapping screws: oil lubrication saves cutting heads and drill bits. It's not necessary to lubricate each screw or your drill bit, but you will find that it can help preserve them and cut faster. The oil will lubricate the cutting surface and help cool the metal so that it's not overheating to the point you're burning out the cutting head of the screw or the drill bit. While you can buy special drill bit cutting oil, I find good old WD-40 does just fine in a pinch. You don't need to go crazy with the amount you use. A little shot on the tip of the self-tapping screw or drill bit is all that's needed. Once the cutting head has a good bite into the post, you can pull the screw out and put a small extra shot of oil in the hole too. Just be sure to wipe it off when you're done, as the oil will attract dirt and look bad running down the face of your post. Tip number 4 when using self-tapping screws: do not over-tighten them. They only need snugged up. Self-tapping screws are phenomenally strong for holding things together, but keep in mind they have a very small bite into the post metal. If you over-tighten the self-tapping screw, it can tear out the threads you just cut in and render that hole unusable. I don't recommend using power tools to do the final tightening since it's easy to overdo it with them. Once the self-tapping screw punches through the metal and runs a few threads in, stop before the screw head contacts the surface. Use hand tools like a wrench or ratchet with sockets and just snug them down. They do not require a ton of force to be tight and sturdy. A little bonus tip for my iron fence folks is to concrete your steel posts in with the seam pointing away from the brackets. Our aluminum posts are extruded. That means they are pushed or extruded out the same on all 4 sides. With our steel posts used on the iron fences, steel is rolled square and then welded, so there's a seam on one face of the post. If we look inside this post here, you'll see that 3 sides are smooth and blank. However, this darker line here shows where the weld seam is. This can show up if you look at the outside of the post at the right angle or light, but looking down the inside really makes it apparent which face of the post the seam is on. Why that seam matters is the weld is going to be thicker than the rest of the post walls, requiring more drilling effort to get through. So when you set your post, turn them so the seam is facing the house or street and not where your bracket is going to attach. If you've already set your post and you have to go through a seam, that is okay. However, a pilot hole will likely make it easier to get through and prevent burning out your self-tapping screw. If you're struggling to get the self-tapping screws through your posts or just looking for some pre-install tips, all of these should help you get them drilled in and set. Be sure to check us out here at ironfenceshop.com. Just in the research phase and want more details on how we attach the Stronghold iron fence panels to the post with these brackets and screws? Check out this video we did. If you have any other questions, you can shoot us an email at sales@ironfenceshop.com or give us a call at 800-261-2729. We look forward to hearing from you.